and we had a program. I certainly didn't know everything about it because I was just a player down on the bottom. But if you look at what the government is doing right now, you look at it goes back to Sean Kirkpatrick's release on Arrow. That was a complete. There wasn't anything in that statement or that document that was factual, and that's just part of a disinformation program. They were putting that out there, hoping that the American people would change their mind, and it didn't change anybody's mind. It just proved that he was a liar, and all the information contained in that document were lies. But then you look at the Air Force Space Command. 6 or 7 years ago, they were all for disclosure when it became a new military branch. I'm sure you all know that Lou worked for him for a while. He called me and tried to get me to work for him. And then things changed radically when a new commander came in the Space Force. Now they won't have anything to do with disclosure. When you submit a FOIA request to Space Force, it takes an enormous amount of time to get any response back. And when you do, they keep asking you for information that you've already sent to them. That's a form of disinformation.
Really quick, Rick, you said that this is when Lou was working for Space Force. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so what was he doing for Space Force when he was working for them?
He was working in a counterintelligence office.
And by that, what exactly, can you break that down and let us know what his job was?
Well, I don't know. You'd have to ask Lou, and he's talked about it before. I don't know exactly what he was doing. But
so when he reached out to you, really quick, last final question. When he reached out to you, what was his specific job? Not the title, but what was he asking you to do? What was going to be your specific duties if you chose and accepted that job with Lou?
I would be working in the counterintelligence section with him, and of course I'm outside the government now, and I don't have a security clearance anymore, so I don't. He couldn't obviously brief me into it. He would have if I would have went up there and accepted the job or get interviewed for it. But what counterintelligence is protecting classified programs, and if there's a classified programs, especially a special access program, you always have a counterintelligence officer assigned to those programs to protect it, and so that's probably what I would be doing. But again, I didn't go that far. I said no to him.
Right. Rotary, we'll get to you. I'm sorry, one more follow-up. So regarding that, I mean, like, what kind of counterintelligence are we talking about? Are we talking about, like little UFO community counterintelligence here? Are we talking about counterintelligence with maybe, Diana Pasulka and Tim Taylor level people, making sure that they're not learning certain things, or maybe they already know certain things? What's the level of counterintelligence that he's protecting national security from?
Again, you'd have to ask Lou because I never got that far. But if a counterintelligence program involves a number of things. It can involve counterespionage. It can even involve counterterrorism. It can involve protecting resources, and one of the things you do in counterintelligence operations is what we call deception operations. You call it disinformation. We call it deception. And you create deception operations to keep information, classified information, away from the public.
Go ahead, Rotary.
Yeah, sorry, I put my hand down, but yeah, Rick, have you ever worked with James T. Lukatsky?
No, never have.
Rick, on that last point you just made, and genuinely asking out of ignorance. So is it legal or I guess constitutional for the U.S. government to conduct psyops on American citizens if it's protecting classified information?
Yeah, there's a number of reasons why you can do it, and it's not you're not conducting a criminal investigation. It's all for counterintelligence, and uh, if, I'm not going to bore you with specific titles of the United States codes, but there are certain within Title 50 United States Code, uh, Title 10, and Title 18 United States Code that allows intelligence operations to be conducted in the United States. You don't necessarily run them against the particular person unless you have reason to believe that person could be a spy or could be uh, involved in damaging national security. And most of the times in the United States, that is done by the FBI, the Foreign Counterintelligence Office or Division of the FBI. They would be doing that. But when it pertains to military intelligence, we would have the right, military intelligence would have a right to run the operation as a counterintelligence operation. And the one of the things that we can't do if we're running a counterintelligence operation is any information that we get can't be used against that person in the criminal proceedings. Just like when we go to FISA court in Washington to get a warrant for something, whether it's a Title III warrant or a surreptitious entry warrant or something, therefore counterintelligence reasons and purposes only, information gathered can't be used against that person. Now, if at some point you realize that that person's a spy, most of the time that's turned over to the FBI. They can go to FISA and get the criminal warrants and so forth. So that's how it's run.
Good to know. Thank you.
So just a follow up to that, I was in a space with Logan. He was in James Fox's film. He was part of the what is it, the task force. And a couple of years ago, he knows Grush and all of those guys. And I was asking him, my questioning was like, here you are on the task force. Your boss is Jay Stratton. Why are you not asked? How do you feel like him coming forward now in a movie saying he's a firsthand witness to Body and Craft? And then I went in to say, how come you didn't, do you feel like, oh, you're not telling me everything? And and I know that his certain job was to talk to only Air Force people that are seeing things in the sky. But the whole thing of that is if Jay Stratton had talked to him and told him things, then he could be able to uncover more stuff about the phenomenon. That was my kind of where I was going with my questioning. And so what led to that was someone told me that, I had said, you could have looked into Hal Puthoff. And then I was told he can't look into Hal Puthoff because they are unable to look into American citizens. Is that what you're talking about, Rick?
Well, you have to have a nexus for the investigation. If you're targeting a person, well, go back to Paul Benowitz. Paul Benowitz was a private. He wasn't military. He's a vet. He was a veteran, but he ran. He had his own company, Thunder Scientific, but he had a classified contract that connects him with the government. Therefore, we could investigate him because he had a high level security clearance. His company had an industrial security clearance. He was making items, uh, uh, gadgets for submarines and for nuclear weapons. So, okay, now we have a nexus. Now, if Paul didn't, and there was actually a person that was connected with Paul that we investigated, but we had to turn that over to the FBI because we couldn't connect him to anything to do with the government. So that's kind of how it works.
Thank you. Go ahead, VC.
Yeah, great. I don't know if you heard my comment earlier about the potential for, some kind of psyop going on with all this drone hysteria, which of course the public gets involved and the private people. There's a lot of pranksters and stuff like that going on, but I thought that was interesting that she mentioned it being some sort of a research project the government was doing. Do you think that's something that you could guess on what that might have been, and would they be doing it as a deception practice or something to cover for something else? And just to jump back to the past there, uh, you would have been with a group of people, of course, and known of Bigelow back in the 80s, maybe even before that. Do you know anything about Bigelow you could tell us? It's got not so commonly known, or did you have any association with him, like employment or work on projects with him? Because he's a fascinating character that's cloaked, black cloaked. That's a black program himself. And he's gathered a hell of a lot of information out there from people, like from MUFON, and, a lot of controversy with that. And just what do you think's going on with that and his connections to the military and stuff like the OSOP, and, you know, what you might know kind of privately and involvement with him in the past. So those two things, please.
Well, I think I didn't hear everything that was being said in here, because one of the problems with my NUCU computer was the sound. I couldn't get the sound to work right, but so I probably missed the drone question. I have no idea what that drone question was. But as
cut
far
out
as
for a minute.
Bigelow goes,
Let him go
yeah,
on
go
the
ahead.
Bigelow.
Sorry, you cut out there, Rick. Maybe just the past 10 seconds. Can you repeat
Yeah,
that?
Bigelow. I said that I didn't hear the question about the drones earlier. He said that I might have heard something about the drones. I was having problems with my computer, my new computer, the sound on it. So I missed that part of it. So I'm not sure what the question was regarding the drone.
I'll rephrase.
But Bigelow.
I'll rephrase that, Doty, Richard, after you finish this other thing on Bigelow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Bigelow. I worked for Dr. Putoff from 1994 to 2007. I think most people know that. At his laboratory in Austin, Institute for Advanced Studies. I did a lot of different work for him. I did have a security clearance during that time period. Hal was working on projects involving DARPA. I had a number of occasions where we had to interface with Mr. Bigelow. I've been out to his facilities in Las Vegas, Nevada, and other locations a number of times. When he had Skinwalker Ranch, I spent time in 97 and 98 out there. So I know who Bigelow is. Great guy, nice person. He's involved in a number of high level or high security programs for the government. And your question is, what do I know anything, private about him? I certainly wouldn't tell anybody if I did. So that's about all I can say about Mr. Bigelow.
Well, I mean, yeah, what I meant was just worked on some projects, with him that maybe you were doing something with the public, like interfacing with the public, or I don't know, just some projects that you could talk about. Or are you under any NDAs with Bigelow where you can't even reveal some of that stuff, what that is, if there is any?
I didn't work directly for Mr. Bigelow. I worked for Dr. Putoff, and I do have NDAs with Dr. Putoff, proprietary information. So I can't talk about that. But as far as Mr. Bigelow, the only thing I can say is that I spent time at the Skinwalker Ranch in 1990, I think 7 and 98, a week at one time, and I think 10 days at the other time. We were doing an investigation. Dr. Putoff sent a team out there with a lot of equipment to examine the area. And I'll say on the record that nothing happened out of the ordinary when I was out there. I never saw anything unusual except for that one hill that had at night had reflecting lights. But I think a geologist came in and said, "Oh, there's just the minerals that are in that hill." So I think that answered that question.
Rick,
But
what
that's
was
all.
what was the goal of this mission that you guys were doing out there?
They were trying to find some anomaly in the soil or under the soil and in the atmosphere that caused some strange phenomena that were was occurring in and around the ranch. The people that lived there and were caretakers saw some strange things flying around and some strange noises under the soil. Apparently, a whole fence moved at one point, and so we went out there to try to determine if we could find a reason for all these for this phenomena. And I'm not a scientist, so the scientific information they gathered, I wasn't privy to, but I was just out there interviewing people. Went off outside the area. I interfaced with the local sheriff and the local highway patrol, and they had some stories regarding the ranch, especially the sheriff who responded out there a few times, but they never saw anything. So that's basically was my job out there. As far as the scientific evidence or lack of it that was gathered, I wasn't privy to that.
Okay, so just to now to jump over to the drone thing, but well, just something passed my mind here though, real quick on the Skinwalker thing. Did they talk about Mount Wilson, his other property that he owned? Was it sort of like there was phenomena out at the Mount Wilson? Because that's another place. That's where they originally started, right? And then they went over to the Skinwalker. So I assume you were talking about Skinwalker, but was there any talk or knowledge with the connection between Mount Wilson and Skinwalker related? Was that interrelated? Probably.
No, I don't recall anything to do with Mount Wilson.
Okay. And then the other thing was I was talking about was Caroline Levitt. She's the press secretary for Trump. You know, the big hysteria that went on. I call it a UFO flap for sure. That went on in the fall. Interesting, a time of turmoil. You know, change of the elections and all this, and the wars going on in the background. And Ukraine is a big drone war. It's come down to a lot of that. So here we have these drone swarms coming in, and one of the things that somebody asked a question in her first press secretary's meeting, to the press about these drones and what they were and what could they tell us about it. And she said, well, yeah, there are people that are probably out there, amateur or even prankster, people that are flying their drones around that way, and then there's misidentification with other aircraft thinking they're drones, and then there are other things going on with the drones, but they're not from foreign adversaries. That's not it. But then she said that there is some application of research being done with the drones, but she left it in that total generic description of just research, something with the drones. And I couldn't believe it. Nobody followed up with all this hysteria about it and everything getting in the news all over, and it spread, uh, which is kind of typical with these things when they happen, throughout the news, the public, it spreads regionally and everything. But then she came down to this research thing that the government had something to do with that. What do you think that might have been related to? Just, just as your background experience, that sort of thing, because nobody followed up and asked her to, what do you mean by the research? What kind of research or anything? It's just left it there. I couldn't believe it.
It's interesting. Actually, I went out there for a few days. I was in Washington, D.C. the third, like the third through the fifth of December, and then I went over to Jersey. And I actually have a cousin that lives down in Bridgeton, southern part of New Jersey, and I saw firsthand. I saw right. That was like the 11th, 12th, and 13th of December. We were seeing it. It was a nightly event, and you could tell that a lot of those drones were private drones being flown by citizens. Some of them were state drones. The New Jersey State Police fully admitted that they had several drones up, keeping track of the other zones, the drones. And then we saw some very peculiar phenomena regarding the drones. That some of the drones seem to change from being a drone into something else. Now that could be the government experimenting with some kind of new drone. I don't know. I'm just saying. I have no idea. I'm not in the government anymore, and I wouldn't have access to that information. But the other thing that people don't realize is that at one point, the Department of Energy, and within the Department of Energy, there's a National Nuclear Security Administration, and they're responsible for deploying teams when there's a possibility of a nuclear event, an improvised nuclear device, a radiological dispersal device. They sent a team to Joint Base McGuire Fort Dix during that time period. They also sent a unit called the 21st Ordnance Company, and you can Google the 21st Ordnance Company, and you're going to find out that they're stationed at Kirtland Air Force Base, and their job is to respond to any kind of event involving a threat posed by a improvised nuclear device. That means a nuclear device that terrorists might have made, or a radiological dispersal device. Why? We don't know. Good question. I know a lot of FOIA requests were made, and the only thing that DOE will admit to is that they deployed teams there for an exercise. Now, maybe there was some sort of a government exercise occurring in that area involving these drones. And but really, that's all I know. I would think that if in fact the government was doing this, they certainly would. It would make sense that because of all these other drones that were being flown in the area, they would fly their drones. So it would mask what the government was doing. People would be looking at these other drones rather than the government drones, but to kind of mix them up, so to speak. But that's really the only thing I can surmise.
Thank you, Rick. We're going to go to Mr. Nobody and then Amy.
Yeah, I could share some things about Bob. This is not anything that Rick told me, so it's. I got to meet Jeff, the owner of Wilson Ranch now, and spent some time up there. And he told me, now I haven't verified this. I haven't even asked Rick about this, but he said that it was communicated to him back at some point when he was buying the property or in that area of time, that some type of we'll just call it an entity. I don't know what it was exactly, whether it was a ghost or something manifesting from some past whatever that lived there on the property, or was it an alien? I don't know, but something manifested apparently. And from what I understand, it spooked to some degree. It spooked Bob. I don't know if that's what caused him to decide to sell the property, but that was the rumor. Can you confirm or deny any of that, Rick, or can you expand on that?
No, I heard that same story, but I don't know anything specific. There are a lot of rumors about both Skinwalker and Mount Wilson. That not just from the Bigelow owning them, but from the locals. Because I went out and when I was at Skinwalker, I went out and spoke to not just the sheriff, but the ranchers in the area, and every one of them would tell me a story. Yeah, I saw this strange object coming out up from the ranch, and it flew circles, and it landed over there. And then one night, it was one rancher told me one night just before Christmas, a few days before Christmas, and this was like in 94, 95 timeframe, there were rockets shooting up. And he thought it was somebody shooting up fireworks. But when he drove down towards the ranch, he realized they weren't firecrackers or fireworks. They were something else. And when he contacted caretaker a few days later. It was weeks later, I think he said. They didn't know anything about it. So that's just some of the strange things that were occurring out there. But specifically, I've heard rumors about Wilson, but and I've never been there, but Eric has.
Hey, Richard. Nice to meet you. I appreciate you being here. I had a quick question for you. Um, being, self-admittedly well-versed in counterintelligence programs in the past, are there any red flags that shoot up with certain narratives that come across, that you come across where they automatically shout, "This is fake"? And how much of what is in the current UFO lore do you think is a psyop or some form of disinformation, even if it's just a rough guess? Thanks.
Well, I'm sure if you go back years, decades, you're going to realize that a lot of the books written about UFOs are disinformation. Very, uh, you don't have to believe me, but you can go to a UFO convention and listen to some colonels and generals speak about what's true and what's not true, and because they know, or listen to some of the whistleblowers that I've spoken with that have never uh, been disclosed yet, but they're waiting to talk. They're on a waiting list within the U.S. Senate, waiting to come out at hearings, and you're going to hear them tell you stories that is really unbelievable. And they're not out there getting this publicity like some of these other people that are coming out and saying, giving their stories. These are the people that actually had hands on. But anyways, getting back to your question, there are so many falsehoods spread from probably back in the 50s, early 50s, up until present day, that is just disinformation, and it sways the public to believe in one thing. And when the government wants you to believe, over here on the right hand, but you're totally over here on the left hand, believing in whatever is in these books or these publications, and that's disinformation. That's a classical form of disinformation, and the government's been doing this for so long, and not just the government. The government might just plant something in your head, and then you go write a book about it. Now you just satisfied the government. You just wrote about something that wasn't really true, and because the government gave you that information, that's how it works. It's so complicated. It's so complex that it's really hard to follow.
So on that note, is there any cases or testimonies of whistleblowers that have come up recently that stick out in your mind as like classic disinformation campaigns? Like, is there anything that you see and you're like, this isn't real? I could tell this isn't real.
Oh, I don't want to. I don't want to embarrass people, but I've listened to, and I've actually debated a number of them, Jason Sands and some of the others. And I'm not saying that everything they're saying is false, but a lot of what some of these people are saying just doesn't follow facts. I'm a member of the Advanced Working Group. It's a group of retired intelligence officers, retired military intelligence officers, CI, DIA, NSA, OSI, Army Intelligence, Office of Naval Intelligence. They're all in our group. We number about, well, we used to number about 100. It's probably 80 something now. We're losing people because they're up there in age. And, these people, former directors of CIA, DIA, and NSA, they worked with this for years. They know the truth. They can look at somebody out there, and they'll say this guy isn't telling the truth. And there are a lot of people out there, and they call themselves whistleblowers. But if you actually, and it's not hard to do, if you FOIA Congress, you can find you. They won't give you the names, but they can give numbers of whistleblowers that have never been disclosed. They've never come out. They're sitting back in the wind waiting. And I'll give you an example. The pilot that shot down the craft over Alaska, the F-22 pilot, he's a whistleblower. I've talked to him. Our group's talked to him. Sat down in a hotel room, talked to him. He told his entire story. That needs to come out. He needs to come in front of Congress and tell his story, because it's unbelievable. It's really, really unbelievable. The pilot that shot down the craft over Alaska, over Yukon, he's another whistleblower. You won't believe what his story is. A female, a staff sergeant, retired Air Force, who was abducted by aliens for years, have marks all over her body. Listen to her story. You'll cringe when you hear her story. So these people are real live whistleblowers who've actually had experience, and they've never come out to tell it. They don't want any publicity at this time, but they do want to come out, and I hope and pray that the Senate will accommodate these three, and there's many more than just these three, that will come out and tell the story, and that would be a real disclosure.
Chase.
Real quick,
Oh.
since it's my space, I'm gonna hog you just for one more second, real quick, and then we're gonna get some hands. So I asked you what percentage of the information that we hear out there is likely disinformation. Would you say it's greater than 60%? 90%, 80%?
No, there's a lot of factual information out there, a lot of it, but it's so mixed up that I'd say maybe probably a good 40-45% of everything you've read or heard is disinformation.
Okay, and on that note, was there a moment that were you always a believer of the phenomenon, or was there a moment within your career that actually shifted your perception of becoming a believer? Because it sounds to me like you're a believer now, just judging by the testimonies that you were speaking of from the whistleblowers who haven't come out yet. And if I don't mean to put words in your mouth, so if that's incorrect, please correct me. But if you are in fact a believer now, what was the moment that shifted your perception? If you wouldn't mind touching on that.
Well, I grew up in a military household. My father was a military officer. During my young days, I had no beliefs in the subject. My brother, who was 4 years older than me, he was the believer in flying saucers. He would go down and buy the True magazines, and some of you in here probably remember those. I remember the first book, George Adamski's book, back in the 60s. I was never a believer. And I went through the regular Air Force, and I got out, went to college, and then joined the U.S. intelligence. All during my time going through the year of training, the intelligence operations course, and all the other different courses, there wasn't anything mentioned about UFOs or investigating them, except for Project Blue Book. It was briefly, we had a lecture once on Project Blue Book, sign and grudge. That really is probably the only thing we had in the formal training during the intelligence course. Then I got to Kirtland Air Force Base. One of my cases involved a suspected landing of a flying saucer, and I'm referring to it as what it was referred to back in then days. Now, of course, UAPs, but Sandia National Laboratories had a facility on base in a classified area, and they had their own security. And this security guard witnessed something land in front of a highly classified bunker, and I investigated that. Well, I didn't know anything about UFOs, but when I got back to the office, my boss, John Brisboy, I briefed him on what the case was, and he said, "I need to get you briefed." And so a couple days later, whenever it was, I went over to the Air Force Weapons Lab Special Security Office, where a colonel and a civilian came in and gave, it was about, I don't remember how many people were in a room that were at least 6, maybe more than that. And I was briefed into this program of the United States government's involvement with UFOs. And that's when I wasn't a believer. I believe me, when I left that building, I drove. The building was on the west side of Kirtland. Our OSI office was on the east side. I had to drive in my OSI vehicle back, and I had to stop, pull into a parking lot, and contemplate what I just heard, because I thought it must have been a psychological operation, because I just couldn't believe it was true. When I got back to the office, I went into a secure area, and my boss said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Is any of that stuff true?" He says, "Everything that you were briefed on is fact." And now I start this in the late 70s, and I realized during my career up to 1988 that, in fact, everything that I witnessed and everything I was briefed on was fact. And that's when I realized that we did. The United States government has had contact with extraterrestrials. We've recovered crafts, we've recovered bodies over the years.
So real quick before I get to Hans, I'm not sure who's next. I think it might have been Amy. I'm going to get to Hans right now, so I appreciate everybody being patient. Um, you mentioned being parts of group chats with former intelligence. Is this kind of is are you one of the only people that in it that believes, or is this kind of a common knowledge within some of those messages? I don't know if you can touch on that or not, but just really quickly, curious if it's a general accepted fact by some of the individuals who know some of the top secrets of the U.S.
Oh yeah, we when the advanced working group, we meet 4 or 5 times a year, and we always meet in a very private environment. I can't say that we're in a skiff or anything like that, but we're careful of what we say. But we joke about what others have said. New books come out, or a new whistleblower come out. We joke about what the fact and fiction is about these people. But they know. When I'm sitting in a room with the likes of Bobby Inman and Robert Gates and some of these other people who know the truth. I mean, they know a lot more about it than I do. I was never ever briefed fully into it. I mean, I was briefed into what I needed to know, but it's just comical almost to sit there and relate some of these stories that are coming out and compared to what's real. And so that we do that all the time when we meet.
Thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate your insight into some of that. I want to kick it over to some hands now. UFO, Sarah, do you know who was winning? Was it Amy or is it?
Yeah. It's Amy Carlos, Mr. Nobody, VC Smart.
Okay, cool. Go ahead, Amy.
Oh, hey, you guys. How are ya? I have a couple questions. For one, the military guy that was on Ricky, do you think if all this information got out to the public, they would handle it okay? If it's real, if people are really engaged and seeing this and everything else that's going on, do you think the public would not be able to handle it? That's what I feel. But somebody could tell me different. I have them all the time. I have everything. I don't know why, but they come and go. They're just, to me, they're just part of the earth. I mean, it's part of like Gaia growing and enriching the land again. It's amazing. And if you stop to look at the beauty of nature, it's coming back and it's coming fierce. And we got all these animals and birds and squirrels. I mean, -degree weather in Illinois. I had them all in the snow, every single animal. And I had my trees growing. It's I don't know. I have mixed feelings with so many different things. Um, and I could be going off the beat, with people, and I get it. but I don't know. It's really hard to explain, and I don't know the way I see it as a beauty. It really has showed me a lot about the earth and the sky and the stars and the moon and the sun. I've learned everything in 8 months. It's incredible though. It really is. And if you get to experience it and connect, I don't know. I think you should see it through. Everybody has their journey. And you're always gonna have those stories, and they're like the military guy, he's got, now giving it away, he knows. Um, so that's it. I mean, I feel good now about it. It's shocking. It really is shocking, but I think with time and patience, it is something that's actually helping humanity. That's how I see it. But you guys, everybody has their own opinions. So thank you for letting me speak.
Yeah, thanks for sharing with us. I don't know if that was a specific question you had for Richard. I'm sure that there's probably several different opinions about whether or not it would be a net positive for humanity. I think most of us in the community think it would be. Obviously, there's people who disagree. So I mean, yeah, I think that humanity is capable of handling this truth. Um, but I guess it depends on how malevolent of a truth it really was, I guess, how dark it really was. So yeah, I think each person probably has their own opinion about, you know, how they think it would affect the outcome of man. But I do think that most people here would agree that they think that we all could handle it, right? So thanks. Carlos, what's up?
Yeah, Rick, so I don't know much about your story. I know you were a disinformation agent. And I'm sure you've been asked this question before, but why should we believe anything you say? And besides, well, you don't, it's like everybody's free to choose. No, how would you defend your character? I guess is my question.
Well, to correct you, I was never a disinformation agent. I was a counterintelligence officer in the with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, and my job was to conduct counterintelligence operations. Some of those duties involved the deception operations. Very few, but I did. So the correct my designation of a counterintelligence, not disinformation. That's the problem that people have spread out there about me. I no longer work for the government. I left the government service in 1988. I did work for Dr. Putoff for 12 years. I did have a security clearance. I had I did not have anything to do with counterintelligence, counterespionage during that time period. My NDA expired in 2002. I've come out. I've done lectures all over the world. I've have 138 episodes in Gaia, telling my story or telling other people's stories. I appear in almost all the UFO conventions. I have a Doty Chronicles out there telling my side of the story. So I think people that don't know me, like you obviously don't know anything about me because you wouldn't even. I've justified myself over the years, and people who have never been in the service or never been in government agencies don't know how it really works. I never ever started a disinformation campaign against anybody. When you're working in a counterintelligence operation, the directions come from headquarters. They involved an operational plan. We used to joke, you can't go in and take a crap without an operational plan. And in that operational plan, it dictates what we're supposed to do. We do our job, we do it well. I was commended a number of times for my job performance. And so that's how it really works. That's the real world out there. And although we had to conduct these deception operations, it wasn't like people would think.
No, we lost you for a little bit there, Doty.
Oh, well, I
I,
think
All
I
right, we
said
lost you
enough.
for probably about
I
10 seconds.
you haven't cut out for me.
Oh,
Okay.
was that
But
on me?
anyways,
I apologize then.
okay. But anyways, that's the way it really worked, and there's no reason why me to continue to be disinformation. If you want to believe me, believe me. If you don't want to believe me, don't believe me. I don't really care. But I'm out there. I'm for disclosure, like everyone else is for. And to answer that one question, maybe there was a question in there about would the public handle it? I think if it was a structured disclosure by the government on everything that the government can tell us, I think the people can handle it. There's certain aspects of the UFO phenomena that I don't even like to talk or think about. One of them is abductions. The other is connection between extraterrestrials and religion. I don't think. I think that would cause a problem among people, but I think most other things, with exception of the classified stuff, that the government could never ever disclose, such as reverse engineering and things like that. But other than that, I think the public could handle it.
Thank you so much, Rick or Richard. I'm not sure which you prefer.
Yeah, I
Rick
don't know
is
what you
fine.
prefer either. I've called you Doty. Hey, Rick. I'll call you
Rick is fine.
Okay. I think Mr. Nobody was up next, and but you know what? Sarah does take precedence since she is co-host. So if you wanted to chime in real quick, go ahead, Sarah. You don't have to raise your hand.
Yeah, real quick, Rick, I have a question for you from an audience person. What is the name of the program that came after remote viewing? And then also, how do you stop abductions? So those two questions.
Yeah. Thought projection acquisition, TPA, is the program that superseded remote viewing. It started, remote viewing died out in the late 90s. There's some of it still went into 2000s. And then the CIA and the DIA developed this new program called thought projection acquisition, where it's not even close to remote viewing. Anyways, I think the first class graduated in 2010. There was 100 in that class. They were trained a year, and that's the new program now. Now, as far as what was the second question? I forgot.
How do you stop abductions? Can you I've heard you talk about it in other spaces. I just want to see if you can break down some of the things you've been learning.
Well, there are classified techniques, and I don't know if they're. I would imagine they may still be classified. I don't know, but I don't want to talk about the classified ones, and I know that were classified. So there is a device that we, the United States government, I guess, or I think it was Sandia National Laboratories, actually developed it, that could prevent, if it was in close proximity to the abductee, it could prevent the extraterrestrial, that particular species, from abducting that human. Now, the complexity of this is we have more than one species of extraterrestrials that have visited Earth, whether it's 5 or 9 or 100 or 1,000, whatever number you want to call, but or say. Back in my days, there were 5 of them, but they were all different. Every one of them different biologics. They come from different star groups. They were made differently, so you couldn't develop a device that would work against all of them. But they did make a device that worked against one particular hostile species, and apparently that worked. Although I never had the occasion to use it, but I know others, intelligence officers, that gave it to abductees, mostly, not mostly, all military personnel that were suffering abductions. So that's about all I can tell you.
Did you mention what species that was that it worked against, just out of curiosity? I didn't know if I heard that. Was it like the grade, or what was there a specific?
Okay, say that again.
Trantyloids.
Sorry.
Trantyloids.
No, the quataloids.
Oh, quataloids. Okay.
Yeah, the quataloids were the genetically engineered aliens. They kind of looked like the praying mantis, but they could make themselves appear human somehow. They could do it, but they were the hostile ones. That and the second one would have been, like Eric said, the trantyloids.
Let me jump in. So we knew about the first question when you had your briefing, your first briefing. Did they at that time tell you about the live alien that they had recovered in that briefing?
Yeah, it started, the briefing that I received in 1979 started with Roswell. Now, that's where that briefing started. Now, I learned later that we might have had contact prior to that, but this briefing started in Roswell. That there was a craft, 2 crashes, actually 3. There was a debris field that was an antenna off the craft that landed in Corona. That was the debris field was on the Brazil Ranch. That was part of the antenna off the Corona craft. The Corona craft was found by an archaeological team from Albuquerque University of New Mexico. There was one live alien, 4 dead ones. The live one was taken to Los Alamos National Laboratories. It lived until 1952. We learned a lot of information about that species from him. And there was another craft, the same species that was found near Pelona Peak in western New Mexico by a rancher in 1949. And I think they kind of put together the fact that it was exactly the same ship, same species, and it had been up there for a number of years. So that's where it started. They talked about the Kingman crash and some other crashes along the way, and how we, what information, some of the information we got from extraterrestrials, some things we got from the crash sites, the technology. That's the basis of the briefing that I got.
Now, I read recently somebody had sent me some information that I'm not even sure if I was even supposed to have, but I saw it and I read it, and it was a briefing. And after I read it, it was about 24 pages. I thought that this actually makes sense. What I'm reading here doesn't feel like it's any kind of deception. But in that particular briefing, they mentioned just the 4 aliens that they found dead. They didn't mention the live alien. So I'm wondering if you. This is where I'm kind of curious: is why would it be that? Now, apparently, this briefing was in '89. Now, they called it. When I read it, it was an I think intermediary, or I think that was the word that was used. It was like it wasn't a full briefing. It seemed like it was a partial briefing. But it seems like you got the full briefing. So have you ever come across anybody, or how would you explain that? Why would one guy or one person get a partial briefing and another guy get a full briefing?
Is Rick talking?
I don't hear him.
No.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Oh no, that's
Can you hear
fine.
me
I'm
now?
just making sure there's not a glitch.
No, I think I somehow my microphone. Okay. Yeah, there was different briefings. And I found out that I didn't get a full briefing. I got a partial. When I worked out of Area 51, I learned that other intelligence officers out there knew a lot more about the subject than I did. I think I got what I needed to know, and that's the big thing in intelligence is you're only going to be told what you need to know to do your job, and regardless what kind of clearance you have, it's only a need to know. And I was given what I needed to know during that briefing at Kirtland, and there were a lot of things that I learned later that I didn't learn in the briefing. One of the things I did learn in the briefing was there wasn't just one extraterrestrial found alive. There were others. There was the Kingman crash. There was two that were alive. I think one lived I can't remember, a month or something like that, and the other one lived longer. And then there were other crash sites, like in the desert of Nevada and other places where they found live extraterrestrials. So, and then there's a lot of technical data that I never learned about. I just didn't have a need to know.
Thanks, Rick. So we have hands. Eric,
Can I
is
make
that
one
okay?
more quick comment, and then I'll be back in line. But I wanted to say something about Bigelow. First of all, I could say this: can't throw Rick under the bus, but if you went to an ice cream store, 31 flavors, Rick pretty much serves us, vanilla, strawberry, and chocolate, which is great. We don't get that from anybody else usually. We get a little bit of vanilla, a little bit of chocolate, but there's so many more flavors. I can assure you that. If Rick had the freedom to tell you everything, it would blow your mind. I mean, it would blow your mind. But I could say that Bigelow certainly. I mean, if you put Hal Puthoff and Kit Green and maybe others that I don't know about aside, you just put them aside. I would have to say possibly Bob Bigelow probably knows more about the subject than anybody in the United States. Is he at the top of the pyramid or right near the top of the pyramid in terms of knowledge, Rick?
Yeah, I think technical knowledge, he would be right up there at the top. I think the as far as some aspects of physics, Hal would be up there on top.
And what Kit does is not talked about because that's the part that they don't really want us to talk about. They're okay with talking about UFOs and things of that nature, but not the study of what happens to people that are affected by UFOs. That's the part that's why Kit probably doesn't get to talk to us, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I don't think that information will ever be released.
All right, we've got Forgive, VC Smart, and Carlos, wherever he was.
Yeah, I got a question for Rick. Rick, what do you know about the reptilians, and why do reptilians seem to hate humans?
Well, the reptilians are, at least when I was around, they were the quataloids, and we don't know. You'd have to get in the side of the head of the quataloids, and I don't know that anybody can. I don't know why they hate us, because maybe because we had them in captivity at Area 51. Maybe because we captured them, we kept them in their environment. I don't know that we tortured them or anything, but maybe that's why, or maybe we did something to them that I don't know about. But that's a good question. I don't know the reason why.
Are they underground, these extraterrestrials?
I don't know of any that are. I know that I strongly believe, and I have some evidence to that, to make this conclusion that there are extraterrestrials living in the ocean, deep in the ocean. But underground, I don't know of any. Now, I'm not saying I know it all, so maybe there are some that's living underground. I just don't know. I just don't know about it.
Do you think the majority are off planet and not not from this planet, right?
I think yes. Although I'm open-minded. I used to be very closed-minded about it because I knew the different species and I knew what planets they came from. But I think now that there could be trans-dimensional, and Dr. Puthoff put a paper out a few years ago about trans-dimensional, and if you read that paper, it's a fascinating paper. But I think that if uh, I believe that if a extraterrestrial race traveled 100,000 light years, or whatever, millions of light years, whatever it is, to our planet, they're not going to be commuting back and forth to their plant, so they have to live somewhere. And maybe they're capable because they're so advanced that they may live in another dimension. So now they're dimensional. They'll stay in that one dimension, and they'll come out and come to our dimension. I think that's reasonable. I think that's possible.
Very hard for me to believe. I mean, this is a psychological operation you're being read into. We already have the Warner von Braun thing about you know, the government has PSYOP plans to, you know, pretend alien invasion, whatever. That's been out there. How do you know in a way that you're not being psyoped as a young person because your rank is very low? It would be an extremely high risk thing to reveal those kinds of truths to you if they were really real. All right. Uh, High risk. And it was a lot of people apparently that, besides you, that may be knowledgeable about this. I think you talked about how it was a briefing in a room when you were read into this. But how do we know that you're not under some lifetime NDA with this, and this is a program, a long-term experiment, and maybe you don't even know? I mean, they used you as an instrument to get something out there, because this is where I have a real hard trouble putting trust in a young person like that if that's the real knowledge. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of low-level people, even like Jason Sands was, that supposedly has all these encounters and everything, and is revealed to these projects. And I just it's hard for me to believe that the government's going to give that kind of information unless they're to people of that level. It would just be the most secured secrets available, but not if they're out for a psyop agenda or something, just to propagate this stuff. They're always experimenting with experimental craft. This is a great way to cover up crash recovery. This is a great way, if there's plenty of dangerous, uh, probably aircraft that have been developed that may be under power with nuclear radiation things. That goes back to Rendleshine with John Burroughs and stuff like that. And I know for a fact in the 80s, they were developing all kinds of drones because I had somebody in my family connected with a defense contractor. And those were things that they were working on back then that were pretty advanced. So it doesn't surprise me that there could have been a secret drone outside Rendleshine, if one wants to believe that, and he had damage from that. So it just seems to me, and because you're allowed to talk about aliens, this is the other thing. It's a cognizant dissonance. All right, you're Jason Sands. We're allowed to talk about the aliens. You're allowed to talk about the aliens. So what's going on with that? I mean, that's again, it's like a cover operation. You can talk about those things, but that would be the most secretive thing they would want to control, in my opinion, to never let out. And yet you guys are out there doing it. So I'm just trying to say, from a logical point of view, I would just see that this is a great way to run a program to develop our aircraft and cover all the accidents and problems and the injuries and things like that. And it also helps the defense industry and the military industry to keep that money flowing. You know, Now we got an alien invasion. I mean, you know, President Reagan's thing, uniting humanity from an alien invasion. So this isn't,
Where's the questions, VC?
well, this isn't a new idea. So I'm just saying, do you think that you could be part of that unwittingly or even knowingly? And how would we distinguish that?
Well, first of all, I wasn't that young. I just got out of college. I went to a year of training. The intelligence operations course is one of the most demanding courses that you could ever take. It prepares a intelligence officer for any event. Obviously, you never were in the military. You were never in intelligence. You didn't understand what the training we had to go through. A lot of it was psychological. We had to go through scenarios where there was no win situations, but they evaluated us how we handle ourselves right up to the point where the operation ended. And so, and we had went through a number of psychological tests and training to be able to graduate from the course. So I was prepared physically and emotionally and psychologically for the position that I was placed into, which was the intelligence officer. So counterintelligence officer. So, and when I was briefed in the program, common sense kicked in. You people, you're on the outside looking in. I understand it's difficult for you to understand exactly how the government works, but they gave me a briefing, and again, I told you earlier that it was very difficult for me to understand because I'd never had any experience with UFOs, or I didn't believe in them. But when I got the briefing, and then I started working in the field, seeing things, reading things, spending time at Area 51, seeing crafts that we had out there, I realized that everything that I had been briefed on was fact. It wasn't some some psychological phenomena or some psychic program. It was real. I mean, the things I saw and the things I did and the interface I had with people that had experiences were real. It wasn't fake. So you can believe whatever you want to believe. I mean, I'm not here trying to convince you anything else, but I think I've proven myself over the years of,
Thank you, Rick.
and others.
Well,
Yeah.
I wasn't
VC,
trying to.
VC, hold on 1 second. I'm just going to cut in here. Yes, you got to just discern for yourself at this point. So, in the, you know, wonderfulness of discerning for ourselves, I have a question for you, Rick. Grant Cameron was in UFO Shane space about 2 weeks ago, and he just did a YouTube video interview thing or whatever that dropped like 9 hours ago. And in both of those interviews, he brings up portals, and he talks about how Tim Taylor told him to go to 999 Sepulveda Boulevard outside of LAX, that is a jump room. And so I'm just curious. This is, like the first time, I've now heard him bring it up twice. That's quite interesting. Break that down for me. What do you know about portals? And also, as I'm also going to throw this in there as well. Ron Pandolfi's wife apparently is really big into portals, and apparently, according to Grant Cameron, they're going out.
Other than that, was being a counterintelligence officer for an operation involving time travel. It was being conducted by San Diego National Laboratories. It had been ongoing for many years before I got involved, but I was a counterintelligence officer there, interfacing with the United States Air Force Research and Development Division out of Los Alamos. And we would travel back and forth to Nevada Test Site, which is now the Nevada National Security Site, where they would experiment. And so I actually saw a portal open. Now, it was only open for a nanosecond. So I knew that we were able to do things like that. And this was in the 80s. Now, there's a lot that I know from working with Dr. Putoff that I can't talk about that involves portals. But if there are how can I say this? I would say there are natural portals from one dimension to another on Earth.
Fascinating. Okay, let's break this down. So you
Like the
working?
Pegasus, Sarah, the Project Pegasus stuff might be. I just wanted to throw that out there. Sorry.
No. Throw that out there. I think this is.
R- Real quickly, Rick, do you have direct information to make that inference? You made it generally. Is there specific
Well,
information
he just alleged
that
he saw
you?
a portal open for a nanosecond.
Yes, and my follow-up is, can you break that down for us? What room were you in? Was it natural, or were they using instruments that they created? And what was the reasoning for this?
Well, they were experimenting, and this happened out at Nevada test site in area, I can't remember which area, 9 maybe, or anyways, they had built a gigantic magnet, a huge magnet, partially underground, and they were firing lasers through that magnet. And other things. I mean, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a physicist, so I can't explain exactly how they were doing this, but they were firing something through that. And we were back in the control center. And when the lightning occurred or whatever, and something, you could see it opened, I asked the scientist next to me, what are we looking at? And he said, we just opened a portal into time. So that's what I can explain it. And again, I'm not a scientist, and there's a lot of other techniques and things that they did that I'm not explaining, but that's what I saw. And so we did this back then, 45 years ago, or 40 whatever, 2 years ago. We have now jump ahead to my time with Dr. Putoff from 94 to 2007. We pretty much, I'm not going to say we mastered it, but we probably, not only did we perfect something, there were other occasions where people, one of the other things I can talk about real quick. At San Diego National Laboratories, we didn't have an internet back then, those days. So they were advertising in different magazines, UFO magazines, other magazines. Any time traveler, anybody that can talk or prove time travel, contact this number, which was San Diego National Laboratories. We got hundreds of kooks, and then we got this one person who said, I can take you to a place in Arizona, and I can show you how I can go into a portal and disappear and then come back. So, they invite him out, they wine and dine him and everything. And when we did a full investigation on this guy, and we found that he really, really didn't have an identity other than a California driver's license. He lived in Barstow, California. He lived in a trailer. He worked in a gravel pit. So we did an investigation. My OSI, we did a full investigation on it. We went out to his house. We went in and saw where he lived. This trailer was like a 12 by 60 or something like that. He didn't have anything in there but a chair and a refrigerator. He had a carton of milk for, I can't remember how long. How much does he pay? She said, he doesn't pay anything. I said, who pays? Well, this company out of Utah pays for him. So we, okay. So when we interviewed him, we asked him all these questions. He said, I know that I can go and come back. I don't have any reason to have anything in this world. I do drink milk, and you look in the refrigerator, you saw my milk. So I said, we said, well, can you show us how you do it? And he said, sure. And so he did, and he never came back, as far as I know. Now, I wasn't fully, vested in that program. Somebody else took over for me when I left, and so I don't know that he ever came back. But he went to a place, and Eric knows exactly where that place is in Arizona, near Sedona. A number of people have been out there over the years, and this was like back in the 80s when he did this. He just walked out in front of a wall of rock and disappeared, and I don't know how he did it, and I don't think any scientists figured it out. And to the best of my knowledge, he never came back. So
So
I can
Rick,
tell you that story.
I love that. So okay, so you are working at the laboratory out in the desert, and you have a phone number that's made visible to the public for time travelers to contact you. I'm not gonna go over this one. Can you break that down? Are you really honestly looking for time travelers at this time to contact you? I mean, what was the reasoning behind this? Did you think that there were time travelers and that they would contact you?
Well, Sandia National Laboratories did this. It wasn't me. It was Sandia National Laboratories. They thought that there could be time. You can prove on paper that time travel is possible, but we haven't been able to do it because our technology hasn't advanced enough. So they wanted to just advertise this question out there, and this was back in the 80s. Whether if you're a real time traveler, then let us know, and we got money for you, and so forth. I think there was a reward. I can't remember how much it was, and a lot of people responded, but only this one guy actually proved anything. There were people who came just for the money, and they couldn't prove anything. They couldn't time travel, but this one person actually did, and so he got paid. Now, Sandia National Laboratories did that. I didn't do it. So, and I don't know how many they actually had that responded to the telephone number, but back in the 80s, you had an answering machine, and I think it was just an answering machine. You'd call and leave your information, and then they would get back. Somebody from Sandia would get back with you.
Did he explain why he was in our time?
He explained. He explained everything. He explained that he went back. The ironic part about it is, I can't tell you how we did this. We were able to find that he was born back in the 18. I can't remember what year it was. 1886, 18 something like that. And again, I can't remember what year it was. We actually found that name, that person was born in that time. I mean, and we did this, and again, I can't tell you how, but we did it. And so we think that he was legitimate, and how he did it, he never got to the point of, maybe he did. Maybe he told Sandia National Laboratories. He never told me, and I was never privy to that part of it, because Sandia took him, and they did all sorts of experiments on him, medical examinations, all sorts of things. We called back in those aura testing, determine whether he had an aura on him, and all sorts of different things, because we knew then, even knew back in those days, that everybody had a certain frequency. And so they did all that stuff. And I don't know what they gathered, the information that Sandia National Laboratories gathered from him. But they did a lot of experiments on him and got information.
Did he seem like, more of a tourist or a refugee in time, if you were to wager?
My evaluation of him was that he wasn't a normal human being. He looked so much different than a human that I would, because when we were investigating him, and it was not just me, there were other agents that went out there. And there were other agents doing things that I wasn't, there to do. So we all got together, and we, did our reports and got together to evaluate what we thought of him. My first impression was, and I had never actually met an extraterrestrial, but I said, I don't think he's from Earth. He just doesn't look human. He only drinks milk. I mean, does he travel back or forward in time to eat? How does he eat? How does he nourish himself? That was my big thing. And I don't know if that was ever answered, because when we went out to Arizona with him, he was in our care at all times. There's four of us, four OSI agents, four OSI agents, one FBI agent. He never left our side. I mean, we put him in this hotel room or motel room, and we were on each side of him. The morning that we were going to drive out to this location, we went to a restaurant across the street from where this motel was, and we all sat there to eat breakfast. All he did was drink milk. We kept saying, "Are you going to eat something? We're buying. What do you want to eat?" No. I just drink milk. So I never saw him eat. So that's why I thought my impression was that he wasn't human. But maybe just because of time travel. Now, when you look at the physics, the physiological effects of time travel, there's a lot of things that people, doctors, experts have written about. And again, I'm not a medical doctor, but that could affect you physiologically. And maybe that's why he doesn't eat. I'm just guessing.
And why he looks weird too.
And
you never
why
know
he
how
looks weird. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, sorry for jumping in line, but I thought they were relevant questions. Thanks, guys.
No, they were great, Sarah. Thank you. Thanks, Rick. We do have hands. I'm sorry I kind of clogged the space up with that questioning, but I thought that was pretty interesting.
I did
Thank
want
you,
to
Rick.
try to just follow up because it's
BC.
part of his question.
Okay, wow. I'm so glad you guys are talking about time and all this stuff. This is exactly where I wanted to go with this. So, considering, I think it's safe to say that the NHI is using or utilizing artificial, or if you will, synthetic gravity production. And we know fairly certainly that the gravity is a function on time and light. I'm very curious as to, I don't know if you can speak about this or speak to this at all, Rick, but considering, well, here would be, I'll just get right to a question here, considering this, just putting a little framework in place. But if time dilation is a function of gravitational potential, what would be the theoretical framework and energy requirement to artificially generate a gravity well shallow or deep enough to manipulate the local time flow? And what would be the implications that might this have for causality, entanglement, and information transfer?
Well, I'm not a scientist, but as most of you know, or some of you know, I teach math. I teach advanced math. I know the equation involved in time dilation. But one thing you have to consider, if you're thinking of extraterrestrials, is that they can manipulate the time dilation. They can manipulate what we call the function of space. So if you add the extraterrestrial equation in there, you throw out our formulas. So, but if you're just talking about what we humans know, it would take a great deal of energy, an enormous amount of energy. But if you manipulate the time ahead of you, then you would need the energy. You would need the boost of energy that you would without the manipulation of the time factor.
And was there any indication from any of the NHI that you had purview on that indicated that they were of a temporal sort of traveler of sorts?
Yes, they could manipulate time, the time. They can manipulate the time in a manner that we could never even understand. When we first found out about it, we it was purely alien to us, because we couldn't, even a top scientist, even back in the early 50s, when even EBIT 1 we found in the Roswell crash, the Corona crash, was trying to explain it to us. we had no earthly idea of what they were talking about, or how could that happen. But over the years, as our technology advances, our physics advances, smart people out there started putting these things together. Then we get CERN, and CERN proves that. There's aspects of CERN, I'm sure all you know, highly classified. But if they open their books, open their videos, and let us really delve into it, you can just see how they can do the same, not quite the same. We can do it, they can do it in a rudimentary way, but they can manipulate the time factor.
So does this confirm any of the sort of speculation, or at least some of the, I'll call it eyewitness testimony of Dan Bursich, who's claimed that he had interacted with some NHI from future, let's call them timelines?
Dan Burish, you mean?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Dan Burish.
Yeah, it does. There's a lot of aspects to Burish's or Crane's story that could be factual. A lot of information, and there's some that's probably not factual. So I don't know why there was the fact and fictions were all mixed together, but there was an extraterrestrial. When I was out at Area 51, I knew J-Rod was there during that time period. That was the 80s. Now, I didn't meet him, or wasn't fully briefed into him, but I saw a truck. It was a 6-pack with a box in the back of it, and on the side of it said J-Rod. And I used to go from my dorm, walking across over to the OSI office, which was building 432, and I'd see that truck go by, and I thought J-Rod was a contractor, because there was all sorts of contractors out there. And one morning, I was walking across with my boss, John Hutchinson, who passed away years ago. But John, and interesting story about John, he was a OSI agent, investigated the Barney Benny Hill case. But anyways, I asked John, I said, what the hell's J-Rod? Is that a contractor? He said, you don't have a clearance for it. That's it. So he told me. So I thought, what? I don't have a clearance for a contractor? I didn't say anything to him. We go over, and soon, I talked to other agents and found out that it was a ET that was being transported from wherever he lived there in the cantonment area of Area 51 out to Papoose or S2.
So can you speak more directly about what these NHI temporal travelers were trying to impart with you, now that you can sort of retrospectively look at that with a more modern day lens?
Well, I don't know what they were. I'm sure they were helping us in technology. I'm a positive, listening to Burish's story and others. There's other people that have come out. There's a Air Force lieutenant colonel who spoke at a UFO convention 8, 9, 10 years. I don't remember now how many years ago. 10 years ago, maybe. Well, no, it was more longer back than that, because Wendell Stevens was still alive, who spoke exclusively whole presentation about the number of, or the amount of assistance we got from extraterrestrials in reverse engineering, because we can't understand, or we couldn't at that time understand their technology, and they assisted us in comparison. What they call comparison technology, they would look at something and say, okay, now this widget is comparable to this is what you have in human technology, something to that respect. But that's really all I know.
Well, I mean, physics aside, did they give you any psychological understanding of time as per how it's manipulated? I'm sure there's some kind of neurological interface with the craft, right? So it's not a one part, it's a 2-part problem that co-creates the temporal anomaly, is it not?
I'm sure they did, but I wasn't privy to that information.
Not a scientist, Hollow. Would you say time's a substance, Rick?
Yeah, in a way, you could say that. There are certain way of advanced quantum physics, when you look at the time element in something in an equation, you know, if there's, well, you'd have to go to a physicist like Jack Sarfatti or Hal Puthoff to explain it in more details, but I could see it. I could see it that way. Yes.
Thank you. It's a bit of a layman question, but I know you're not a scientist, so thanks for the response.
And do you remember the name of the lieutenant colonel you were mentioning there, or?
Let me get it for you. I don't remember right offhand, but
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So this is fascinating. I want to go to Zen Zarab. He's been waiting patiently, but keep this going because I'm fascinated. I'm on the edge of my seat.
Can I go?
Yeah, and I just want to thank you. I just want to thank Doty real quick because, like, I mean, you're a legend. You've just been taking all these questions and handling any like critique with just in like, I don't know, a very admirable way. So I appreciate you being here and thank you for answering all the questions. Solid.
100% on that, Chase. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Rick, I got a question for you. Whitley Strieber has stated for years now that there's a close relationship between the extraterrestrials and the afterlife. For example, he said that the implant in his ear allowed him to communicate with his deceased wife. Have you come across anything either in your military service?
Sarah, I wasn't sure. Are you going to Zanzibar?
Have you heard it? Can you guys hear my question?
I hear you.
Oh, okay.
Who
Who
spoke up? Someone.
I was going to ask Rick.
Go ahead.
Has he come across anything like that in his research linking extraterrestrials with the afterlife?
Oh, I thought Sarah was going to Zanzibar. Or do you want?
I think he just thanked
Emily did that.
Doty for the questions, right, Zen? Or did you have something to follow up on?
No, I had. Oh, you guys didn't hear me. I asked an entire question.
Oh, no worries. No, I think we heard you with the afterlife question,
Yes.
right?
It was for Rick.
Yeah. There's one case when I was working for Dr. Puthoff, we were doing an experiment. I can't go into details on that, but because it involved a highly classified program. But anyways, we did. I did interview a woman, an elderly woman. She was like 70, 80. I can't remember now exactly, but she was up there in age, 85 maybe. Anyway, she her husband had recently died, like a month or two before I was interviewing her. And now let me go back a little bit. This lady had been abducted. She had been abducted a number of times, and this is why she was targeted. She was targeted. We were targeting her because she had been an abductee when she was like 30 and when she was 50 and so forth. So anyway, that's why we were interviewing. And she said that one of the times that she was abducted, which was most recently after her husband had died, this particular species told her that I can get you in contact with your husband, and they did. She spoke to him. Now she said she spoke to him in a bubble, and again, I can't explain everything, but he was in a bubble, and she was sitting in a treatment table, or she calls it a treatment table, which was elevated a little bit, like a treatment, like a slab, but it was moved up a little bit. And the bubble came in front of her, and she had a conversation with her husband. He was in the bubble, which lasted, I don't remember how long, but then he went away. So that's the only time I've ever had anything to do with the afterlife and extraterrestrials.
Thanks. That's really fascinating.
Good question, Zen. Thanks for asking it. Who's next, Sarah?
VC, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I was trying to get that earlier in because it was all interrelated. But to finish up from before was you mentioned, some people consider there's like a religious component to this. And I don't know what your feelings are about that with the entities, somehow being related to what might be portrayed in religious traditions and things like that. And as you know, Jacques Vallée goes back in history and finds all the mythologies and the relationships with sightings and things like that. And do you have some, because I noticed you pinpointed some of your thing, at least with your reading into the program, started with the Roswell incident. But since you've been in the thing for a long time, many decades, and well connected, you've met people that are along the Invisible College, Jacques Vallée side. Do you lean that way, that these entities have been here all along and that there are presenting in they're masking according to the culture of the time, the historical position that people are, and then they present that way in the context of that. And maybe that's why we see UFOs in sort of a technology viewpoint nowadays, because that is the dominant, influence in our culture in the United States, especially, all the ETs, Star Trek, everything in there flooded that way. So how do you relate to that? And I wasn't trying to criticize you earlier about your thing. I'm just trying to understand how, because I've heard people like Walter Bosley. Okay, you know who he is, the Air Force intelligence guy. He's a big writer in the UFO field. He openly says that they protect platforms, uh, United States top secret aircraft, and they just love it if people believe it's an alien craft. So, he says that. We know Lakatsky says, and that's in Weaponized with Corbell. So everybody, I'm just telling you what even people like them say, that they're allowed to lie, to create counterfeit documents, to do whatever they want, in this field. So it's really hard to unwind anything. But what do you think about this idea, the historical thing with Jacques Vallée? And and since I'm on Jacques Vallée, you'd be very interested to go listen to his recent interview with Joe Rogan. And if you started about an hour and 30 minutes and go forward, Jacques Vallée pretty much debunks the Nimitz Tic Tac stuff, and also the so-called aliens that probe into the nuclear bases, missile bases, and the power stations. That those are government black ops to, war games on the one hand, things like that, and black ops. And this is Jacques Vallée. Okay, so and I've heard him say that twice about the
What was your question, VC? I missed that real quick. Could you repeat it?
yeah, I'm just because he might want to comment on that if he knows what Jacques Vallée is
Okay.
talking about. And then go back to the religious thing, history of the aliens been with us, manifesting as cultural change throughout history. That's
Well,
it.
I certainly haven't. I don't know everything there was is about connecting extraterrestrials to our religious history, but there certainly is. EBA one explained that his species had been visiting Earth for a couple thousand Earth years. So that there's right there that tells you that that was one particular species of extraterrestrials, Ebens, that have visited Earth, and I'm sure there's probably other species, and that's why they're here now, because they visited Earth, decades or thousands of years before. The connection between religion, I don't like to talk about, because I always get into a strong discussion with people about it, and I just don't want to do that, because I have one belief. I have knowledge that I don't really want to share with people. So you believe whatever you want to believe regarding that. As far as Jacques Vallée, I know Jacques. He has his own theories, and I would counter is maybe Jack is providing disinformation information about what he's saying regarding the Nimitz and the nuclear. Uh, there's one thing I know about the nuclear intrusions by UFOs is that the government has the United States Air Force, and a very small part, the Office of Naval Intelligence, has thousands of pages of documentations on investigations they did. And there was incident that happened in the the middle 1970s at a Minuteman missile site that proves that what is occurring there is in fact an extraterrestrial presence. So that's all I'm going to say. So maybe Jack's just disinforming people. The government doesn't want him
What was
to
his
tell the
argument?
truth.
What was Jacques' argument? Did
I,
you
I,
catch that,
I can
Vichy?
I can explain it real quick and
Yeah.
concisely. But do you believe what Walter Bosley says? Because I know you're well aware of him and some of the things he says, that they use these top secret platforms, and if they can disguise it as the sightings and stuff like that to say it's aliens, let people believe it is. That's good for that program. I mean, you agree with that, I hope. But what? And then
Oh,
go ahead.
absolutely. That's what we did on a Paul Benowitz case. What he was filming over Kirtland Air Force Base was a highly classified drone, the Air Force drone program back in 1980. They were experimenting with the drones there. And back in those days, the drones had to be launched out of an aircraft. And so they were flying in close proximity to the mothercraft. And Paul was filming those things, and he was thinking they were extraterrestrials. All we had to do was convince Paul that, yeah, I think you're right, Paul. They are UFOs. So yes, absolutely, Bosley's right. That's exactly what our mission would have been.
Yeah, and then just as far as the Jacques Vallée thing, anybody can go back and listen to this. But where he's talking about the Nimitz thing, there's 2 points he wanted to make in that thing with Joe Rogan. And again, you have to go to about hour and 30 and go forward. I don't know how long. But in the Nimitz thing, he said even Raytheon wrote a sarcastic letter about the technology. Everybody jumped on, including Nick West and all this, with the heat-seeking thing. And Raytheon wrote a letter. They're the designer of that product, and wrote a kind of a sarcastic letter to the UFO community, and then to the Navy, or just to dispel the idea that this technology could be used to show the shape of the proper shape of the object or anything like that. That its only sole purpose and design is to get the heat signature of the aircraft that are out there, and then identify whether it's friend or foe, whether they can engage it or not. That's all the technology is designed for. And then they sort of sarcastically said, well, if you want us to get something that'll really image what it looks like, well, we'll be happy to build it for you, but this is not what this equipment's designed for. So that's from the designer itself. And then also what Vallée said, that he's in the uh, oh, anyway, investment community, and also travels in all these circles anyway with the military and stuff. And he said that the people told him about as far as the radar, these things looking on the scopes, going from 100,000 feet down to sea level in a second, or reappearing in one place in the sky in another, that's electronic warfare stuff that's being used, and that even commercially, um, as far as the radar goes, there's commercial technology in that it's not designed to display this way, but the electronics have been known in civilian technology, that you can image radar this way out there to make something look gigantic on the other screen's radar, or appear as a certain craft when it's not, like a jet or just a UFO or whatever. That they can do this electronic warfare with the electronics, and it's actually some of that technology is integrated in civilian stuff. And so he's just trying to say, look, you know, this is wargaming out there that they're doing, and they do not tell the pilots and stuff what they're doing, because they want to just see the reaction, and
Is
that's
that
what.
holographic technology? Sorry. Just due to the sight of the object and
Well,
stuff.
as far as the detection goes with the rate, because they're talking about things dropping, instantaneously from 100,000 feet down to sea level, or reappearing in one place and appearing in another. And that when they're using that as a referencing that to the radar equipment on their jet, that the recordings and stuff like that, what Valet is saying, that's electronic warfare. That they're testing new equipment. That's one of the things the Nimitz was out there. It was going out there testing new installations of equipment with the electronics and things like that. So this is not an
BC.
uncommon thing. And
Yes.
just to say too, that somebody like Chris Bartell, which I'm sure you're aware of him, Rick, he had the highest clearance with the nuclear weapons, and he worked on crash programs and guarded the highest top secret things. And he says that's just prosaic. That's what they do. I mean, this is what you can expect. And then so the pilots can be misinformed. They don't have to tell and all that. Anyway, that's enough. And as far as Valet saying about the nuclear probes and the weapons bases, he said that he's connected to the black ops world. And this is something, again, the same kind of thing. They have to make sure those missiles are secure. And I think when he said 12 years ago, if Jesus H. Christ or a UFO comes over the fence line, whatever it is, it's a psychological operation. They need to make sure those missiles are secure no matter what, and the people are going to follow what they're told, what the orders are. So no matter whether the weapons are turned on or off, anyway,
Thank you.
that's, I'm just saying, that's what
Thank you,
Valet said.
BC. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so
Yeah,
sorry. We do have
yeah,
hands.
yeah, yeah.
I want to go to paranormal and then Danielle.
What's up, Paranormal? Welcome to the stage, brother.
Hey, thanks, guys. Thanks for the space. This is an awesome talk. Rick, I was wondering what your take is on, or what you know about the people known as the Collins Elite, and if you have ever possibly ran into one of these people or suspected somebody of being part of the Collins Elite.
Think about them. Never ran in any of them, and I've never had anything to do with them.
Cool.
Is it all you had, Par?
Yeah, you can go on.
It's a great question.
Yeah, I think so too. Danielle.
Hello. Has anyone managed to a metallic orb?
You cut out there a bit, Danielle. Can you repeat?
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you now. You just cut out for a second.
Okay. Has anyone reverse engineered one of those metallic orb things that can turn into a plasma orb?
Not that I know
Was that directed to me? No, I don't know anything about it. No.
I read an article recently where they didn't show the proof of it, but that humans do have the technology to create these plasma orb type things. But that doesn't mean that everything we're seeing now is plasma orbs that humans are creating. It just means that we have developed that tech.
Okay, because these metallic orbs also develop like a plasma layer around them.
You cut out again, Danielle.
It's also that these metallic orbs can develop a plasma layer around them.
That might be part of their bubble, their time warp bubble that they have that they could travel on to do what they do. I'm guessing. Do you think that's a possibility?
You mean warp travel, like warp drive? Yeah, like a hyperspace bubble. Yeah, warp bubble. Okay.
That could also explain
Thanks.
why sometimes people record these things and they appear to be blurry. That whatever that is that's surrounding whatever it is that it's surrounding is kind of creating a distortion, and that's why it's not always crystal clear.
Because it's bending, so it's using gravity waves, and the gravity waves bend light, right?
Yep.
So I just want to say that the
Thank you.
psyops in UFO land. So this is my take on it, Rick, and I'd like your comment if you would. That it's okay. So I think most of us agree UFOs are real. I think we agree they've been here for a very long time.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I just wanted just two questions. And one is just to fill her in. You were talking earlier. I just popped in the space by happenstance, and I'm curious, about your background there. And I do have one other question after that. So I just got two. But the first one was, yeah, that was very interesting. You filled in how you were wanting to go into the Air Force, and maybe you were something like in the ROTC, maybe, I don't know, in high school. I didn't, you didn't say that, but I mean, maybe you were already thinking about joining up with that since your father, I guess he might have been in, like Walter Bosley's father, was in Air Force Intel too, and maybe your father was as well. And you were thinking that way, but then I think you indicated that you went to school first before and by that I mean after you got out of high school, you went to some college, and then you joined the Air Force a little later. And I was just curious, what your studies were in college. Did that point to anything you were going to do in the Air Force? And then I just had a family member that they were in the military, and later on also in their career, after they've been a long time, sometimes they'll send you back to school and you can get like a graduate degree, master's, or anything like that. I was just wondering a little more about what your interests and studies were, and yeah, how that might have related to your later career, and any specific things of interest, like, psychology or something like that, or sociology, something that would sort of point to your intelligence career, but you may not, obviously known what your thing was. And then I do have a follow-up, a separate question, totally different. So
Okay, all right, good
thanks.
question.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Rick.
No, I went into the Air Force first. I got out of the Air Force and then went to college. That's the way it went. And I wanted to be a teacher. So when I started college, I took pretty much education courses because I wanted to be a teacher. But then I kind of got interested in political science. And there were reasons for that. But so I took a lot of political science courses because I was just fascinated with the subject, along with education. My minor was in education, and that's the courses I took. I didn't take anything out of the ordinary. Back then, in those days, it was pretty straightforward college. I went to a Pacific Lutheran University. I had to take required religion 1 and 2 and theology 1 and 2, which being a Catholic, I thought the theology was quite fascinating, learning the philosophy of a religion. So that's what happened. That's how I didn't have any special classes on the subject. That came later when I entered the intelligence arena.
Okay, what's your follow-up, BC?
Okay, that's interesting. I didn't quite hear the name of the college, but maybe you'll say that. I think it might have been related to the Catholic thing, but and did you get like a 4-year degree out of it? And then the other thing, all I'm asking now, look, I'm not asking for any classified secret information here, okay? All I was just wanting to know was, in your life, and I'm talking about in the 80s and 90s, you would have certainly have heard of and come across, the famous Bob Bigelow, Robert Bigelow, all right? And you would have crossed paths probably talking about different subjects. I mean, he's one of the invisible college sponsors of all the paranormal UFO stuff. His history. So I was just curious, what sort of contacts were you coming across him with that you can talk about? Any stuff to do with the Mount Whistling or Skinwalker, that would actually involve Bob Bigelow himself, like just your personal encounters with him. What can you tell us about what those were about? Thanks.
Yeah, I did. When I worked for Dr. Putoff, I met Bob Bigelow, and when I worked for Dr. Putoff, he set some people from the Institute for Advanced Studies out to Skinwalker Ranch. At that time, Bigelow owned it. So I interfaced with, I didn't directly, I had conversations with Mr. Bigelow, but, nothing more than that. And that's the only time I've ever interfaced with him.
Oh, okay. So interesting. So in the 80s or 90s, you really didn't have any kind of paranormal UFO questions. He didn't have anything for you, about that. And if that's not true, you'll correct me. But what was the name of the college that you went to? And did you actually were able to complete college, or did you just go into the Air Force before you could, get a degree in something?
No, I completed college. But as far as Bigelow goes, I didn't know Bigelow in the 70s and 80s. I said I didn't meet him until I didn't start working for Dr. Putoff until 1994. And that time frame between 94 and 2007 is when I would have had contact or interface with Robert Bigelow, because remember, he was the one that owned Skinwalker Ranch in the 90s. So when we went up there to do some tests, experiments, Mr. Bigelow was there, and that's where I think I first met him. Now I did have interface with him, I think, at the lab. He would come to the lab in Austin, but other than that, but not in the 70s or 80s. I didn't know Bigelow in the 70s or 80s.
But okay, but you did cross his path in the
Hold on.
night.
You said two questions. I'm giving you
Well,
your fourth question, VC, but go ahead. That's
I
your
was
fourth question. Just want to clarify that.
all right. It's just following up on the same things.
Yeah,
It's
but
not really different.
it's kind of a weak
All
line of
right.
questioning, but I'll let you go. Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, so just to confirm then, so really you were kind of doing the stuff through put off and did talk to Bigelow some, but knowing how interested he is in the paranormal in the 90s and 2000s, he just didn't ask you about any personal experiences or anything like that. In other words, he didn't sort of want to debrief you on what you thought you knew about the phenomena. I guess that's what I'm driving at, if that ever happened at all.
Well, I had private conversations with him about the subject, but nothing about the paranormal or anything like that.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it.
Okay, I'll ask you this question. If